obviously, who were not able to get in. So I'd just like to say at the beginning, thank you for coming. Thank you for your participation. Now, I've been doing town hall meetings since 1983, and we have to, in my view, it's the most effective and finest form of our government in action, is ability for me to talk to you and for you to talk to me. And I believe that I've been able to be a much more effective member of Congress by having town hall meetings, of which I've had thousands. But we have to have certain basic ground rules. And that is that we respect the views of one another. And we don't yell, we don't shout. We have plenty of time. We have well over an hour here. I'll be glad to hear from you. I will be glad to respond and then allow you to respond. But please respect the fundamentals of a town hall meeting, which is that we respectfully listen to each other's views. And I understand the frustration that people feel. I understand, as you know, that the stock market, I just saw in the paper that yesterday, because of the stock market fall, the average 401k was hit to have $16,000. That we have an unemployment rate of 9.1%, that Arizona was on the top of the housing wave, and we had the furthest to fall, and we need to talk about that and how we can restore the housing market. And I know that there are people here who strongly and legitimately disagree with me and the things that I've been doing, and that is your right to do. But I'm asking you to do it respectfully to others. And don't, if you disagree with someone's opinion, you don't have to shout at them. And you can shout at me, okay? But shout individually, okay? And I've been through, as I said, thousands of town hall meetings, and they're rough. That's how they should be. And people give their frank and honest opinions. But let's please observe the fundamentals of a town hall meeting, which is respect for our fellow citizens' views. All right, could we agree to that? Thank you. Thank you. Reverend Sharon Ragland is here. Sharon, Reverend Ragland is our, thank you very much, Pastor, thank you, and Pastor Meredith Brandy of the St. Mark's Methodist Church for hosting this event. I want to tell you, because the people who couldn't come in today, we will be doing, I'm going to be on a trip for about a week, and then I will come back and we'll do more town hall meetings, because people right now are in grave, grave difficulty, and our economy is. And I'd just like to start out, if I could, just mentioning with you a couple of issues, making a couple of remarks, and then I will listen to you. First of all, I want to mention, of course, our sorrow in grieving over the loss of those brave young Americans in Afghanistan, and also the loss of the Afghans as well. They are the best of America. And the great honor of my life is to have the opportunity to visit them in places like Baghdad and Kabul. I was in Kabul over 4th of July with Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Joe Lieberman. And General David Petraeus had a re-enlistment ceremony. 273 brave young Americans who could go home, finish their enlistment, who re-enlisted to stay and fight with their friends and their comrades. So our heart goes out to families, and we share in their sorrow and their sacrifice. So, and I'd be glad to have an opportunity, if we can, to talk a little bit about the situation in Afghanistan as well. Second, obviously, is the economic situation we find ourselves in today. Now, I will certainly take responsibility, or give responsibility to all of us who are in elected office. I will say that responsibility rests with the Bush administration, when spending also was out of control. But I would argue also that the continuation of that out of control spending, where we went from a $10 trillion deficit to a $14 trillion deficit, means Keynes on steroids. We went through the Obamacare, we went through the stimulus package, and we obviously went through other big spending measures without paying for them. During the Bush administration, I voted against many of these appropriations bills, and I voted against the Medicare prescription drug bill because it wasn't paid for. But what we have done is we have mortgaged our children's futures. And I would like to point out to you that during the President's administration, this has happened. We've gone from 12 million unemployed to 14 million. Unemployment, as you know, is 9.1% in Arizona, and some of our counties in some parts of Arizona, it is far higher. The federal debt, as I mentioned, has gone from 10 trillion to 14 trillion. The debt per person was 34,000, it's now 45,000. And the list goes on and on. And here's what really hurts us as much as anything else. Home values have gone from $193,400 to $169,000, a drop in home values. Now, I'd just like to mention to you that it was the housing crisis that triggered this economic difficulties we are in. And I've always said that when the housing market in America stabilizes, we will be back on the road to recovery. Now, we bailed out Wall Street, as you know. The liquidity and their profits are high and their salaries are high, and Wall Street's doing fine. Main Street is not. Back in 2008 when this started, I said we should do what they did in the Great Depression. In the Great Depression, they formed up a government agency that went out and bought people's mortgages and then gave them back a mortgage that they could afford the payments on. Now, some people will say immediately, well, why should we bail out my neighbor when I've been working hard and making all of my payments? And my question then in return is, well, which would you rather have? Would you rather have an empty house next door, or would you rather have people living in it who are at least making payments? Now, in the Great Depression, they did that, and over many years, the government actually not only got their money back, but profits as well. And this administration and this Congress have failed. Meanwhile, with Fannie and Freddie, whose CEOs made obscene salaries and continues to hemorrhage money as in an ineffective way. So what have we done? We have now faced a situation where not only is there problems, significant problems in the United States, but a lot of that sell-off yesterday was triggered by the European problems as well. If the Italian economy is in serious trouble, which it apparently is, then that's such a large economy that the Europeans are going to have great difficulties, if impossible, to restore the Italian economy. Remember that the first recession, the first downfall, had a lot to do with the housing market and the financial markets. This crisis we're in has a lot to do with our economy and our debt and our deficit. Now, let me just mention several things I think we ought to do to help our way out of this. Why not have a moratorium on new federal regulations? I think if you talk to any business person, large or small, they will say, one of the reasons why I'm not investing in hiring is because I don't know what the next regulation is that's coming down. From Obamacare, from the Dodd-Frank bill, from all of these others. And look at this, 197 days it's been. These regulations there's been one regulation repealed, one rule. And that was a rule, you'll be glad to know, that designates milk spill as not an oil spill. I know you'll be gratified. I'm not making that up. So there's 364 rules that are enacted, 46,184 pages of regulations, 60.9 billion cost of burdens of the new rules, and 41.6 million hours of annual paperwork burden. And who does this hurt the most? The small business people. Large corporations can hire auditors and accountants and all that kind of stuff, but small businesses can't. And small businesses are the generators of jobs. Right. As you see, large businesses doing layoffs. So, why don't we do that? Why don't we have a federal hiring freeze? I think that might be the right thing to do. Why don't a federal civilian hiring freeze? A federal hiring freeze. Third of all, why don't we cut? You've got to let me finish, and then I'll let you talk. Okay? Remember what I said at the beginning? And, so let me just finally say, let's cut the corporate rate from 35% to 25%. I'm going to give you two more chances. I'm going to give you two more chances to get out, and then I'm going to have you leave, okay? Let me finish.
Well, you won't listen to me.
Sir, I am finishing my opening remarks, and then I will let you be the first. I will let you be the first one to speak if you will let me finish my remarks. Let's have common courtesy here. And in exchange for that cut of 35 to 25%, remember many small businesses file as corporations. Then we should close these loopholes that are carved out for special interests, including all of these subsidies, ethanol subsidies, sugar subsidies, all of these special interests because of lobbyists in Washington that have been able to get these special deals for special interests. The tax code is this high. Is there anyone in this room who understands the tax code? I'm not raising my hand. So we need to have a simple, fairer tax system in America. Why don't we have just 3 tax brackets? Why not just 3? And then and clean out all these things, and then we will give investors and companies the confidence to invest and hire. Companies and corporations in America today are sitting on $1.5 trillion, and they're not hiring and they're not investing because they have no confidence in the future. So, with that, I'd like to say thank you for coming, and I would like to introduce our most happy member of the audience today. Sir, please stand and go ahead.
Okay, I've got 2 things I'd like to talk about.
Yes, sir.
I edited.
Here's take the phone, microphone.
I edited the regulations, as you don't like, that we're allowed to be put into the meatpacking industry for one company. I edit those regulations, and there's a point at the slaughtering of cattle where you run a knife up this belly skin, and if you're not careful, you will puncture their intestine, and intestine is where E. coli is. Guess what the regulations were written by? There was always a USDA inspector watching that one activity, but it costs a great deal of money if you have to rail off an E. coli infected cattle. So we wrote the regulations that we will watch it, and the government said, we will audit you. Guess what? They don't watch to see that that intestine isn't punctured. So your statement about regulations and eliminating regulations, and that was done under the Reagan administration, has caused people to die. Our banking regulations, by repealing a 1932 law that allowed us to bundle mortgages into groups and sell bonds that were AAA rated. Because we could insure that.
You're speaking of the Glass-Steagall Act?
Yes, that should never have been repealed. That regulation should have stayed in effect, and we would not have had this bust that we had in the... One question that I've asked of every conservative I could get.
I take it you're not in that group.
I'm not a conservative. I am a progressive.
Good.
Now here's the question. Why do you believe that tax breaks to the wealthy, produce jobs in the United States? They did when JFK was in power because the United States was the best place to invest your money. Today that is no longer true.
Don't answer your question.
Well, that's... Okay, I was afraid I might not be able to respond. But why do you believe that tax breaks to the wealthy improve jobs in the United States?
First of all, on the cattle issue, I would be glad to look into that and provide me that information. There has been the recent cases of E. coli, as I recall it, mostly come from vegetables. But if there's a problem, I would be more than happy to look at your solution and obviously your knowledge about it. I certainly think that that's an important input. On the Glass-Steagall, I agree with you. That the repeal of that was a serious mistake. And let me also say, if I might, that there were those of us who called for the reform of Fannie and Freddie, which were the major but those of us, and there was an Inspector General's report several years ago, and there were those of us who argued for and wanted legislation that would have brought Fannie and Freddie under control, which, and we wouldn't have had the difficulties that we had. Why do I think that? First of all, I think we all want to be rich, and so I don't hate. No. Oh, you don't want to be rich? Okay. You never know how to do people who don't want to be rich. That's fine. Okay. So I believe that if you tax people, no matter who they are, you take money from them and you give it to the government. And I believe that when you take money from people, then it prevents them from being able to invest their own homes and build and hire people. So that's a fundamental philosophical difference. I'm going to let you respond, but first you let me finish. When Ronald Reagan came to office in 1981, we had double-digit inflation, interest rates were around 20%, we were in terrible shape. First thing we did was cut taxes, and we did have, and cut spending, and we had the strongest economic recovery in recent history. I mean, those are facts. We can argue opinions here, but we can't argue facts. So I believe when you were talking about the money overseas, the best way to bring that money back is to cut our corporate tax rate, because we have the highest. I'm asking you again to let me finish as I let others finish, okay? And I mean that.
You need to listen to us.
I am listening, sir, and I'm responding. I am listening and I'm responding, sir, and that's my right. Okay, because I believe that you will have companies and corporations, and they will tell you that, will come home and create jobs and hire here if they had a lower corporate tax rate. That's what they're saying. Go ahead and respond.
Okay, if you've looked at annual reports by corporations, you will see every one of them has increased the number of factories offshore with the corporate tax reductions. They will continue to build factories in China, putting Americans out of work. If we tax them, at least the money would stay in the United States. Okay? Now, I have three friends.
Sir, you've got it. We've got to let it go.
Wait a minute. Answer that question.
I disagree.
You know that the money is being invested by corporations.
I'm answering your question, sir. That I disagree. We have a disagreement. I hear from all these CEOs. They will
read the annual reports.
They will invest and hire if we cut the corporate tax rate more. All right, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Senator, first I want to give you the only compliment you're probably going to get.
Come on now. Let's act like grown-ups here. Come on.
That's the only compliment you're going to get from me, because you show a lot of guts. Probably more guts than you had in that prison cell. But I mean, the statement is this. I'm 54 years old. In 2003, I had open heart surgery of mitral valve. I've got a pacemaker. Without the government, I would not be alive. And I'm on Medicare Part B. I'm disabled. And that's my life. And I'm too young to die. And I think that when you don't tax the rich, you put people like me at risk. You put seniors at risk. That's important to me. And I don't know, unless you've been there, and many people in this room probably have.
What's your question?
The question is why not make the rich pay 4% more and make sure we keep Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security solid? That's my question.
Because if you tax the rich more, as you were saying, that obviously would not have the effect that
well,
we
no,
need.
the budget is busted because of Bush's tax reductions. That's exactly it. That's exactly the math. Work out the math. People in the book And that number you have out there is fake, because that deficit is mostly Bush's. That extra $4 million, we started to $4 billion. We started to put that on the books because we took the wars into account.
We want a question.
Well, that is a question, sir. I asked the question, why not tax the rich more?
Okay, now listen.
This goes back to my previous answer, and that is that I do not believe that raising taxes on anybody is helpful in making our economy better and providing people with the wherewithal to make investments in jobs. We have a philosophical difference of opinion. I appreciate and respect your views, and I thank you for them, but I think I owe you my opinion as well as accepting your opinion. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. First of all, Senator, thank you for your service over the years.
Thank you.
It's not an easy job. Secondly, thank you in the last couple of weeks during the budget crisis negotiations when it was more like children in nursery school. You were one of the few adults who really stood up for what was best for our country. So thank you for
Did
that.
I mention that 84% of the American people said that the congressmen, men, women acted like spoiled children.
Yeah.
I have not met the 14% who believe that we did. We're down to paid staffers and blood relatives.
But I have a question. Let me get
Yes,
to
sir.
the question. That is, to live within our means, we have a long way to go and a lot of sacrifice. And I asked the question, my father taught me, when living within your means, the easiest way is to increase your means. I'm not a wealthy man, but I know down the road the sacrifices have to be made. People who have acquired some wealth like me, we're not paying our share. And so, more by restoring the Bush tax cut. I would rather pay taxes so that man can live than pay another tax again.
Thank you, sir, for your generosity and any money that you would like to send.
That, sir, is a reasoned response, and people have asked me that. And my response has said that what you're saying and suggesting is a country in which the middle class pay taxes mandatorily and the upper class pay it voluntarily. That's what my America says.
Well, sir, again, we go back. This is, I think, the third time that we have a fundamental philosophical difference. And I do believe I can show you some historical fact that if we raise taxes on Americans when we are in difficult times, it makes the situation worse. Now, I'm not saying that we should never raise taxes, but I think it would be very clear if we raise taxes, it's my considered opinion, that it would harm the economy, because we all know the only way out of this is a growing economy, and a better economy, and a lower unemployment rate. So all I can say is that we have a disagreement here, and you know, the last election was what President Obama said was a quote shellacking. And the last election, people and their Tea Party members here will tell you, it was about jobs and the economy, and it was about spending and taxes. And the majority of the American people spoke very clearly. So that was a mandate. And I believe there's some people right here who are Tea Partiers who are not happy with it either. But the point is that that was a mandate of the election, and we should respond to the electorate. The overwhelming majority of people in Arizona voted and said, we don't want our taxes raised, and we want you to stop spending, and we want you to stop mortgaging our children's futures, and we want to take care of you, sir, but we also want to take care of our children and our grandchildren, and that's our
Everybody asks me what question. Well, everybody always asks me, what would you ask if I ever got a chance to speak to my state senator? boy, is there a lot to say. I've been from one spectrum to the next. Get them out of there. We needed McCain needs to go home, to getting another one in there. You know, all over the page. But I guess overall, what it boils down to, there is a
Could I remind you, I was in Sky Harbor Airport, a guy came up to me and said, "Say, does anybody ever tell you look a lot like Senator John McCain?" And I said, yeah. And he said, doesn't it just make you mad as hell?
I've been very aware, politically and historically. I'm a Native American, but we own our lands. My aunt's our tribal historian. I have a wealth of information, socially and politically. My statement will make sense for the question. There is a huge divide between different ideals, whether we want social policies and who's going to pay for it, whether we're a republic and we want individual liberties and freedoms and pursue happiness. That is his job and his role to help us pursue that. When we keep hearing, tax the rich, I may not be rich, but I know if you're going to take any more of my money, I'm going to hide it, okay? And that is what a rich person is going to do. They will. They take their business and their jobs overseas where they can make a profit. And of course they have. But for the most part, most of this economic woe that we are in is because we have had a house that has been mostly ran and controlled by a social network. That is my question to you, McCain, is we have a huge mess in our house. I have to keep my house under control, okay? I'm driving an old truck. I had to sell it during, I couldn't afford it. Gas is too high. We've had 5 jobs this year, lost one just last Thursday, okay? Thank God that we live within our means. I've never owned a credit card my entire life. Everything I do, I pay for with cash. I am 55 years old. I've raised 6 kids. I've been on a farm. I live up on Dove Mountain now. My question to you is, you have allowed my borders to be an open door, like people coming in my front door, and without any accountability and no responsibility. I just have to keep spending, providing, paying, and we have double and triple dippers in pension plans with my neighbors, my public servants, and I don't even have a pension. I'll never have one. And they're what are we going to do about that? If we're going to put a house in order, we need to get real about my money and how many times it's being dipped into.
Well, thank you very much for Thank you very much for your question and comment, and thank you. You mentioned about the immigration issue. We still do not have our borders secured. According to the General Accountability Office, our borders are 44% secure. There have been improvements. John Kyle and I have a 10-point plan that if we implemented that, we would be able to succeed. My plan, I think, I would like to see, what I would like to see happen in the next few days here, really, is for the President of the United States, who is elected to lead. Remember, Republicans only control 1/3 of the government. It would come forward with a specific plan we're putting everything on the table and saying, okay, this is my plan. I want to work with the Congress. Then the Congress come back to Washington. We're on vacation now, as you know. Come back to Washington, sit down together. I'm for the Select Committee, but we don't have to wait for the Select Committee. The President has yet to come forward with a specific plan. And the presidents are supposed to lead. And then we could all sit down together, all of us, no matter how passionate we are about certain aspects. But America needs to come together. And we need to sit down and work on this issue, not for our sake, but our kids and our grandkids. Yes, ma'am. Bring it up, microphone.
Thank you for coming out today, Senator McCain. I would hope in the future you might choose a slightly larger venue, especially after such a combative debate over the debt ceiling, so that more people could have participated or at least listened to hear you. One of my concerns, before I even get into my real questions, is that I'm encouraging my children to be active participants in their democracy.
Glad
My
they're here.
son, my oldest son, Alex, will be voting in the next year. And I've encouraged him when he's felt passionate about something to contact your offices. Every time I have tried to contact your office over the last 2 years, I just get a full voicemail box. And it's very difficult to be responsive to you about my concerns in time to step with the legislative agenda if we can't get through to you.
Well, let me just respond very quickly to your first comment. I'll be glad to give you the logs of the thousands of calls that we have returned, but go ahead.
Well, the problem is, I think that's great.
Yeah,
But
we return and we answer letters
But
and we do
I
that.
never can get into your voicemail.
Well, I'm sorry you can't call again, and we will,
Okay,
you know.
I've tried to.
We'll have somebody, one of our staff is here to talk to you today. Go
Okay,
ahead.
and just a little nitpick. When we go online and we have to select in what categories and things, I have a doctorate, my husband does not. So I'm not a Dr. and Mrs., and I've even written you guys, can we have a Dr. and Mr.? I mean, to have that, but
Check that out.
just a little, you know, I was raised by feminists. My father was a feminist, as was my mother, and I'm proud of my degrees, and I like to not have to.
Doctor, I will have a staff member contact you immediately. We will fix that problem.
Now, my son had some questions about the math
Good.
on the unemployment.
Good. Those come from the Congressional Budget Office.
Yeah, in particular, I'm just curious. I'm going to be a senior this year. I'm going into calculus AV, but I'm not. But I'm a little confused on the percentages, and I'm not saying they're wrong. I don't understand them. Like you have the unemployment rate of 7.8 and 9.2, and you get
It's 9.1 as of a few days ago. Yeah.
But it says it changed 18%, and then also with the $1.85 of gas price to $3.71.
Well, if there's any, by the way, if there's any good news about this, if there's any good news, it's that the price of oil is going down, but that's because of the bad news that they think there's going to be less of a demand for oil, which is really
Well,
unfortunate.
and that got to our question, which was, when TARP passed, my understanding was that Congress, I don't know if it was coming through Congress or a separate entity, was going to put regulations, which I know you're not liking, on speculation on oil. And I would say that
I did not see that in TARP.
I thought that, I understood that there was going to be, or there was discussion about putting caps on speculation on oil, which has affected our gas prices.
That
Okay.
wasn't.
Well,
Anyway, go ahead.
okay, so my concern is, one, when you ran for office, you talked about nuclear power. Our state doesn't have enough water really to support that. And I was wondering, what kind of measures are you interested in supporting for jobs here in the state that would support other renewables like wind and solar? We have 3 wonderful state universities, and it's a shame that we do not have an endowed chair or position that supports renewable energy in our universities. When you talked about investing in the future,
Don't answer the question.
I'm just giving my questions so that people can then move on, so I'm not. It's so long.
We don't know.
I'm sorry, if you might understand, I have been trying.
She's got a doctorate.
I also would like to say, I appreciated that you tried to move through all the nonsense with that budget. I would say, I offer you my support to continue that and not get rolled over by news media who try to get you to backpedal on that, because I think you are in the right position to try that. You've had a history of reaching across the aisle, and I'd like to encourage you to do that. I'm an independent. I was raised by independents, and I'm raising new independents who are not tied to any party, but and also not so rigidly stuck to any ideology. How do you see us going forward when we're so entrenched politically to actually get to compromise? It's so disconcerting when we can't ever get there. And especially like with healthcare, I also think that excuse me, we
You have to conclude.
I can really relate to the this gentleman here.
Well, good.
I had to stop my teaching at the university because I was diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension. I have to spend $200,000 a year on medication. And insurance is increasing now. What are we going to do to stop private insurance companies from making it difficult for us to continue to make our programs?
Thank you very much. Look, you covered a lot of ground. Thank you. And to your son, I'll be glad to send you the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, numbers which those numbers are based on. They're not entirely up to date, obviously, on the events of the last several days, but we will be correcting them for future town hall meetings. You covered a lot of territory. Thank you for your involvement. Thank you for your engagement. And I would point out that this lady has a point. About 10 years ago, the independent registration in Arizona, I believe, was around 10%. Now it's up to 30%. We're up to 30, basically one-third, one-third, one-third. And that is because of the rise of independent voters, because obviously they've not been satisfied by either party. Look, on the issue of renewables and wind and tide and solar and all that, I think that Arizona is ideal, obviously, for solar. We are ideal for some of those. But I also think that there's time that sometimes they distort the market. For example, ethanol subsidies are the biggest ripoff in history. Nervous about this issue of how we're going to take government money and put it into certain projects. Now, I think that there are certain areas that they should be, but right now we have a huge problem with obviously with the debt and the deficit that I've been trying to point out, and we're going to have to make some tough decisions which will not be acceptable to a lot of people. Now, I see sitting there two very unhappy veterans. One on the U.S. Navy and the other one Air Force.
I'm unhappy too.
Oh, there's I was going to say, yeah, excuse me, with hats on that are unhappy.
I'm unhappy with what I've read so far.
I don't blame you. So who wants to go first, Air Force or Navy?
Navy.
Navy. Chief Petty Officer, Navy, who everything I ever learned about leadership, I learned from a Chief Petty Officer.
Yeah.
We trained you well. Actually, this is
Well
for my
said.
wife. She wants to know when you guys are going to quit pointing fingers and get down to work.
Can I say, sir, that you make a very legitimate point, and it's reflected in the polls as I just talked about earlier. I would remind you that for the first 2 years of the Obama presidency, or most of the first 2 years, they had 60 votes in the Senate, which override the filibuster, and they had a majority in the House of Representatives. We got Obamacare, we got Dodd-Frank, we got the so-called stimulus package, and in November, the American people told us to stop it. So one thing I know, sir, because I ran for re-election, I know what the message of the people of Arizona was. And they said, stop mortgaging our children and our grandchildren's future. Stop this unsustainable path which will bankrupt the country. Now, we were talking about benefits. This gentleman and this gentleman were talking about Medicare and all that. You know what happened in Greece? And we're not going to be Greece, by the way. But you know what happened in Greece? When their economy collapsed, the first thing that went was entitlements. We've got to preserve these entitlements for present and future generations. But some changes have to be made. Let me just tell you one. In Social Security, we should be raising the retirement age gradually, not to affect present-day beneficiaries. But I know you say no, but you come up, if you don't like that answer, that of course is not in keeping with the whole fundamental premise of Social Security. But if that's your view, I'll be glad to consider it when you do. Yes, ma'am.
I actually have a succinct question, which is, if If in fact, the mandate from the voters in 2010 was to deal with issues of budget, spending, revenues, etc., why is Congress spending so much time debating social issues instead of dealing with those economic issues?
What social
Abortion, for one.
We have not had a single debate that I know of on the floor of the Senate that
The
has
House
returned to
has,
abortion.
and you're part of Congress, so that's why I'm asking the question.
But ma'am, my answer is that I do
Okay,
not know
thank
of
you.
a single debate. I'm sure there's been some speeches made, but the debates in the floor of the Senate have not been about quote abortion or other issues. All the way in the back there, if you could.
Senator, quick question. I would like your definition of victory in Afghanistan and Iraq, and as a follow-up, how many casualties and how much money are you willing to expend to attain your definition of victory? Thank you.
My definition of victory, sir, has been and always will be a nation that has a modicum of democracy, but most importantly, no longer poses a threat to the national security of the United States of America. In September, we will commemorate the 10th anniversary of 9/11. Those attacks at 9/11 originated with Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. If we fail in Afghanistan, and we left once before, after they drove out the Russians, then there is every likelihood, in my view, that Afghanistan could return to a base for attacks on the United States of America and our allies. So my definition of victory is a country that stumbles along with great difficulty, as the Iraqi government is stumbling along with great difficulty, but no longer poses a threat to the security of the United States of America and our allies. We are withdrawing from Iraq, as you know, although I think we should leave a certain presence to help them in certain areas, but that's just my opinion. And in Afghanistan, as you know, the President has ordered withdrawal. Problems in Afghanistan or Pakistan, which the ISI is cooperating with Taliban and other elements, the Haqqani network, corruption, and also the perception now in the region that we are withdrawing and they have to remain and are making certain accommodations. Yes, sir.
Sir, I'm sorry, but you didn't answer the second question, which I think is the more important. To obtain those goals,
Yeah.
laudable or not,
Yeah.
how much money and how much more
I'd have to
love
give you the budget of it. It's
Well, how much more
approximate.
love?
It's several $100 billion a year. How much did 9/11 cost? How much did 9/11
Sir,
cost? Is my response.
but I'm asking.
I will send you the exact number.
Sir, you're missing my point if I may.
My
I'm
answer is
sorry,
I will
but-
send you the exact number.
Sir, my point is how much more, not how much has
Yes.
been.
Yes.
How much more are you willing
And
to
my
spend?
answer is I will send you the exact number. But it is not cheap. It is not cheap, sir.
Well, how many more casualties?
It
At
is
one
not
time-
cheap, it's very expensive. We are leaving Iraq, as I told you, which is a very dramatic reduction, as I mentioned, and there will be this, there will be a very expensive. I will send you the number, sir. That's all I can
Sir, I
tell you.
spent a year over there. How many casualties? Do you have a number? Is it worth 10,000 more?
Sir,
Is
it's
it
not
worth
worth-
15?
Sir, it's not worth a single casualty. And our hearts go out to the families and the friends of those who have sacrificed. But I can tell you this, I know what it's like to lose a war. And the one thing about those young men and women who are serving,
Sir, I've
they
been
don't
here
want to
exactly
lose this
that.
war.
I'm aware of that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to
As a
direct
police
the
advisor.
question a little bit differently, and thank you for being here, Senator. Always appreciate your service over the years. Haven't always agreed with you, but I have a good question for you. Since the economy began its big tank with the housing issue, what is the prospect of having Senator Dodd, Senator Frank, and Franklin Raines on trial for the
passed in 1932. Bush is
I think that history shows, sir, that that the encouragement of these, of providing people, fundamental violation of fundamental principle is you don't lend money to people that can't pay it back, was violated, and there's no doubt that Senator Dodd and Congressman Frank encouraged this Community Reinvestment Act, which caused a lot of this. So, but I can't accuse them, liberals, of criminal activity. But I can say to you, I do not understand why Franklin Raines and Guy Johnson and others have not been called to account for the tens of millions of dollars of salary they were paid during this lady here.
Next question. Is there any possibility of legislation being proposed that would have the 40% of Americans that are not paying any income taxes now would have to pay a small amount, even $10 a month would raise billions every year, and this would prove in shared sacrifice and balancing the 40% need to have skin in the game.
That number is about 47%, but let me remind you, if I could, seriously, I'd like to remind you that those people pay sales tax, excise tax. They do pay, I know, and they do too. And they do too. Wait, I mean, there are people who, every time they conduct their daily lives, they have to pay taxes. And I want us to, honestly, I do not think that to increase taxes on people that are already paying certain taxes, such as sales tax and others, that they are paying some taxes to poor people in this country. My friends, we have unemployment and underemployed and people who are not employed. I would say that have been so unemployed so long that they have left the unemployment roll. So I think we should try to fix this economy for them to help them in probably some of the toughest times of their lives. Yes, sir.
I do believe that many of the problems we have in the United States could be solved if there wasn't a hierarchy, there wasn't a arrogance in Congress. And I do believe that if you lived like we live, all the people in Congress had the same kind of benefits that we have. And I'm asking a question now. Would you be willing to go back and make that kind of change? Sure.
Well, let me just give you an example, sir. In the 1980s, I stopped taking pay raises, and I give all of my additional pay raises, which is now a fairly good amount of money, to charity. And sir, in all due respect, I do know what it's like to live in fairly rough conditions.
I know. Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
Sure.
Do you believe that if the Congress had the same medical plan and the same benefits that we have, that a lot of things would change for the better?
I don't know, but I think...
Why would you have a different plan? Why would you be separate?
Actually, we have the same as the federal employees do. Now, if you think federal employees should have a different plan, then that's a good, legitimate question. But the fact is, it's the same as the federal employees benefit plan. I'd be glad to send it to you. It's not a unique plan. Ma'am, you're up.
Oh, I have a very short question.
Go ahead, Stan.
I have a short question.
I'll be
maybe
right
not
with you,
simple.
Sergeant. You're next.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm not so hot on the idea of raise taxes, don't raise taxes, because to me that's too simple a solution. What I'd like to know is what's being proposed in Congress. What are you doing to structure the taxes so that it encourages the corporations who are sitting on those trillions of dollars to actually create jobs onshore here?
First thing, and I've said this for a long time, is lowering the corporate tax rate. Ooh. But see, when I talk to business persons, large and small, they say, look, our taxes by doing business in the United States of America are the highest in the world. And so, and also, and at the same time, close those loopholes that they take advantage of, which makes some corporations like GE pay no taxes, that we need a fairer, flatter tax code so that everybody is on the same level. That's number one. The other thing is, of course, is this business of government regulations. They want to know what their environment is going to be with all these new regulations coming down the pike. And the third thing is for us to start having an environment where people can be sure of what their economic future is. And that will require investment of these $1.5 trillion that they are sitting on. Sergeant?
Sir. I have two questions.
Yes, sir.
Americans are taught in school to believe in democracy and majority vote. So my first question to you is, why is it not a majority vote in the United States Senate, and it's dysfunctional because of the filibuster, and it's been going on forever, and it's worse now than ever before? Question number one.
Can I respond to that in a minute?
Sure.
Our founding fathers made it very clear that the reason why we would be bicameral is because the Senate and the House would be different. I believe that it was Benjamin Franklin said that the Senate is the saucer that cools the tea, I believe was that line. So the fact is that the 60-vote filibuster has been misused, and it has been inspired a negative reaction. But there would be no reason to have two houses of Congress if you had simple majority votes. And that happens to be
that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I'll be glad to send you, look it up. There's a Federalist Papers that I would be glad to send you where our founding fathers debated and discussed.
I've read the Federalist Papers, but there's nothing about a filibuster in those papers.
There is a in there about the Senate having the ability.
It's a different house.
Right, right, go ahead.
Just to comment on that for just a second, I don't want to belabor the point, but the presumption when the American people elect a Senate of 100 senators, that 51 of those senators makes it a majority and should be able to move a question. The Senate has, by its own rulemaking, interrupted that democracy that the American people have a right to expect. Question two.
Actually, I respect your view and I understand the frustration that you feel because of the gridlock. So I understand your point.
The second question is an opinion question, but do you think that the Republican Party is going to continue to practice economic sabotage on our economy until the next election? Because that's what I think they've been doing.
Could I say, sir, thanks again for your service. Thank you for serving to start with.
We see it on TV every day.
Thank you again for serving, and you too, Chief. Wake up. But I want to say to you, sir, your view of what the Republican Party is doing with 1/3 of the government is very different from my view. In other words, my view, sir, is that for nearly 2 years, we went on a spending spree, and the largest expansion Bush is responsible also, sir, but not to the tune of the spree that we went on. Now that is my opinion. And that is my opinion and my view, and I think I have some facts to back it up. And I want to point out again, facts are stubborn things. Now, there are obviously people in this room that don't like those facts.
Like
The
the amount
facts
of
are
spending.
that there was an election last November, and that election overwhelmingly said, stop the spending. Jobs in the economy, stop mortgaging our children's future. So, you are free to interpret. I campaigned for re-election and I was re-elected. And I said to the people of Arizona, I said, I will help create jobs, will help restore our economy, and I will do everything I can to stop the mortgaging of our children's future. And I was very clear in my campaign. So, again, thank all of you for your service, and I'm glad to see that old geezers like you are keeping up with the passing events of the day. And again, thank you for your service to the country. I'm very grateful. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I thought the Army should be represented here too.
Yeah, they should. Right.
I've been married to a Special Forces commander for quite a number of years, but he's also a small business person, and I'm a retired teacher. So we sort of hit the whole spectrum. I'm sitting next to one of my best friends who on the political spectrum is, I'm over here and she's over there, but we're able to talk. And I think that's one of the things that I think all of us should feel, that we need to get down to business and stop being a Tea Party person or a conservative Republican or a liberal Democrat. I don't care who you are. We have to think about what's good for the country and not necessarily our own ideology. I'm willing to make sacrifices. And I think, and my husband agrees with me, and he's a little bit different than I am politically. But the reality is, it can't be a approach. It has to be a multiple approach. And I agree with the fellow in the rows two rows in front of me, is that there has to be some revenue changes. But it's got to be equitable. I think that's what a lot of people are upset about when it comes to whether or not we create more revenue, is that it's not equitable. And two is we need to, I believe it has already been passed where we have some infrastructure money set aside to create some jobs, and that money has been held up for whatever reasons I don't know. And the third is, as a retired teacher, I understand this, there has to be some changes in entitlement. But it's got to be equitable, and there has to be communication between the groups, and to stop all this ideology, and I don't care which group it is, we have to talk, just like my friend and I talked. My question is, we have to stop being so dogmatic about what our opinions are. My friend and I, do we have differences of opinions? Absolutely. But we both are thinking about what's best for the country, and that's what you've got to do. You've got, I think the voice of the people is when you see that it's got to be that there has to be more communication, and there has to be some compromise.
Could I have, before you leave the microphone, since you referred so often to your friend, maybe she should maybe be able to say a word. Go ahead, please.
Well, actually, I hadn't planned on. I was going to sit back and listen to everybody, but the thought that occurs to me is I serve on a community justice board and work with youth. And on occasion, as recently, I have a youth that was one of my former kindergarten students. And I know some of you have probably read a long time ago that book, All I Really Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And so I have this youth thinking about some of the lessons he learned in kindergarten and to share back. And so I pulled out this paper on the way driving down here. And one of the parts that got my attention is, think of what a better world it would be if we all, the whole world, and it had some things it talks about, if all governments had as a basic policy to always put things back where they found them, and to clean up their own messes. So I guess my question would be, if it's to be formed in a question, is how are we? Someone over on the other side said it, and it kind of got lost. How is our government going to do what my friend and I are able to do when right now it seems so entrenched into negativity. We've got all these different philosophies. Why can't we take the best of everything and pull it together? I see that he's making, I'm as conservative as they come. Probably there's no one in this audience more conservative, but even that makes me feel like that's all about blame. When I'm working with youth and I'm working as a kindergarten teacher, I'm trying to get past the blame and get to the solutions. So how do we take this House and the Senate and turn it back into about working for solutions?
Thank both of you for your very cogent and important comments. And I think that should be a lesson to us here. Let's please be respectful of each other's views. And I know that sometimes it's maybe a little angering that somebody says something you don't agree with, but let's really continue to be respectful as possible. Let me give you an idea in response to both of your questions, comments, because we really do reflect the anger and frustration that the American people feel about the way the government is functioning today. We mentioned those numbers earlier. Why not this idea? And I've just thought about it, frankly, in the last few days, since actually about the last 48 hours. Why not say, President Obama, give us a specific plan, a blueprint for what you think needs to be done to get our economy moving again. Not platitudes and not speeches. And then, let me finish now. And then call Congress back to Washington here in the next few days or week or whatever it is, and let's debate and let's have the kind of respectful discussion that you just mentioned that people are demanding, and then come up with an answer and a solution to these problems that we could get the support of the American people on. Does that sound like might be a reasonable approach to you? Go ahead.
Personally, I think what people have to realize is that we all have to make, at least temporarily, sacrifices to get it back on the road. It can't be one move, it can't be two.
I agree.
We all have to look at within ourselves.
Would you agree that a mechanism for that would be the President of the United States? Yes. To say, okay, here's my plan. Now, you members of Congress, come to Washington, cut your vacation short, and sit down with me and with the American people and come up with a solution. If there's one thing that we agree on, and that is we are in deep and serious trouble.
Right.
So then we show the American people that we're willing to work together. Right?
And I think you actually do this more than a lot of other politicians. You've got to think about not so much your job, but what's best for the country, and that has to happen if we're going to get out of this mess. And it just incenses me when we see that people just aren't getting along. And they have to realize whether or not I'm retired or my husband is a small businessman, everybody has to take a hit in this until we're out of this mess, or else this mess isn't going to get better.
You are both the voice of reason. Thank you. This gentleman.
Thanks for coming, Senator. I really appreciate it. My question is, I have 2 questions in 10 seconds. In order to get people back to work, and kids and everything, do you believe that we ought to eliminate the minimum wage? And number two is, if you were voting on the DREAM Act today, would you vote yes or no? Thank you very much.
Those are both very tough questions. I would not vote to repeal the minimum wage. It wouldn't pass. The second thing, on the DREAM Act, the DREAM Act in itself is something that I think an issue that needs to be addressed. The DREAM Act, by the way, is children of people who were brought here illegally. Okay, but I think that we also need a guest worker program. I think we also need to secure our workers. I think we also need to look at the issue of this whole immigration issue in a broad fashion. And second of all, in 1986, my friends, Ronald Reagan, my hero, said, we're going to give amnesty to 2 million people, and the issue will never rise again. Well, we gave amnesty to 2 million people. We now have 12 million people are in this country illegally. So before we act on these, and it is a terrible problem, children who are brought here by their parents against their will. But I don't want to have 10 years from now us to go back and have to revisit that issue again. That's why border security is also a vital part of immigration reform. And I can only take 2 more questions. One from you, sir.
I don't need the mic.
Want to stand up?
All right. The question I have is real simple. Being retired, every year you fill out your income tax papers, and you're filling out like 20 pages of income tax papers every year, and you get, everybody complains about the fact that all these loopholes, everybody has loopholes, you know what I mean? And they complain about those loopholes that the big businesses have. I don't understand why we have to fill out 20 pages of income tax papers. Why can't they go down to 1 page? Why can't you turn around and say, this is how much I made, this is how much I paid? We have 3 levels of taxes that everybody pays. Okay, you pay this percent, you pay this percent, you pay this percent. And I don't understand that. We're all Americans. We're all equal. Should we tax women more than men? Yeah. Should we tax older people more than young people? You know, how about religion? Should we tax certain religions more? Or color? You know what I mean? Everybody sits there and talks about all these differences, and you sit there and you want to sit there and say, oh, these people have this money, we can tax them up the hill. And I'm just saying, 1 equal tax, get rid of all loopholes. Okay? And the people who have a job and they're working, it automatically comes out of their paycheck. They wouldn't have to even file an income tax.
Thank you, sir. First of all, you're exactly right. There's no one that I know on earth that understands the tax code completely. And it's about that high. And it is a testimony to the influence of special interests and lobbyists in Washington. And I think most Americans, though, honestly would think that 3 tax brackets is fair. I don't think that would be unreasonable. But really, we've got to get rid of these loopholes. I mean, it is just unacceptable. And what happens is Americans lose faith in the system. And when that happens, when we have enormous problems. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming and listening to us all. I'm a realtor. One thing that is really concerning us is this 20% down for buyers. Buyers will not be able to spend that. I know that not every person deserves a home, should be a home. There are some folks that should rent, but the ones that do want a home, that really need one, they won't be able to come up with the 20% rent. So we're hoping that you don't do that, and then also the interest rates. We need that also. But if you could discuss the housing market, I would appreciate it. Thanks, sir.
Well, as we know, the housing, just very briefly, because we've talked about it a little bit before, Arizona's economy is not going to improve until the housing market stabilizes, my friends. That's some straight talk. Arizona, Nevada, California, and Florida were on the crest, and we had the furthest to fall, and it was terrible. In Scottsdale, Arizona, and parts of Pima County, we had people buying houses, leaving them vacant, and flipping them. You know that for a fact. Now, that's not what housing is supposed to be about. And that was because of this cockamamie idea we had where basically we were giving people houses for nothing and expecting sometime in the future for them to be paid off. We've got to get the housing market stabilized. Most people have been pretty respectful today, except for you. Now, can I say thank you all for your courtesy? Thank you for being here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. looking for young men like you and women. It's fine. Thanks, Tom. Good to see you again, old friend. Come here, Old buddy of mine from prison many years ago. Oh, wow. Thank you. It's great to see you. Thanks for coming. Yes, sweetheart. How are you?
I'm good. If you don't like publishing, stop. It's not for me. Under Obama.
All right. Then thank you very much for that input, and I think it's very important. Thank you. Hey, how you doing?
Are you aware of the veteran?
I usually try to greet them when they come.
My dad's supposed to be there.
Wonderful.
85. And my comment on one of the things that I didn't get to make, I'm tired of hearing, entitlements sound like we're on welfare. We pay for those.
Entitled. It means entitled.
But they should say we paid for since I first started working on this. I got you. Been paying, and we're not on the budget. They've been funded up until 15 to 25 years. Get that off of there. Deal with it as separate. Don't deal with it as a budget cutting.
In all due respect, I think we have to deal with everything together. I think everything's got to be on the table.
I think we need what we pay for.
Yes, sir.
And over the years, they've raised it. I remember when it was only $36,000 you had to pay. Yes, sir. Now it's $100. Now we need to raise it above that to pay for it. Bring the premiums up, but it's not part of the budget.
But would you agree that since Americans are living longer, back when we had the 83 change, that also may be part of it?
I was an iron worker for 12 years. There ain't no iron worker.
I mean future.
There ain't no iron workers. There ain't no iron worker that can work at 70 years old. There's a lot of people that are out there, hard-working people that are working.
I understand.
And if you really want to go back to work, Jim Fleck, I know him well. I worked for him. He's a great guy. But if you give him a tax break, he's going to put in his pocket. If you give a man,
Listen, I got to talk to all these other
But if you give him a man wanting to buy more cars with money, he'll hire more people.
All right, sir. Thank you.
I help people with disabilities get jobs, and I voted for you. I don't think I'm Republican, but I'm a social. I've been working like a social worker technically. I've interacted with state, local, federal programs. I'm helping people get off SSDI right now. I was at a meeting last week. 98% of us say that people, there's so much fraud. This was my question. Is there something being done about the fraud?
We keep pushing it. Listen, we keep pushing it and pushing it.
How can we help you? Because we see the front line.
Keep the pressure on. Keep the pressure on.
Can we talk to your office?
I got to say goodbye to the chief here. Chief, thank you for your serving. Thank you. Thank you for your service, old man. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm proud to know you. I meant it. Everything I ever learned about leadership, I learned from a chief petty officer.
I'm not unhappy. I just came to listen.
Thank you, sir. God bless.
John, why'd you lock the Tea Party people outside? Out in the heat, an hour and a half.
Don't be a jerk.
I'm not being a jerk.
Yeah, you are. We let as many people in as we could.
We're afraid of us hobbits.
We'll be back in.
I'm afraid of us hobbits.
Oh,
terrorist hobbits, John. Yeah.
Stop being a jerk.
Yeah. You're a jerk, John.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Listen, let's be friendly. Hey,
no.
Come on, let's be friendly.
No, I don't want to be your friend.
We'll have more town hall meetings, and we'll have everybody come together.
I got here 9:15.
Be rest assured, we'll bring people in. Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm 27.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, John.
I'm 27, and I've been looking at the Budget Control Act that just passed and all that stuff. The Budget Control Act last week. I see all of these things as basically a non-fiscal responsibility by the government, teaching kids of my age to just ignore credit cards and housing responsibilities. What is this? I'm responsible. I pay my taxes, I pay my bills, I pay my credit cards, and I have credit card rates that are 35%. That was loan sharking in the 80s.
You bet. It is
and the government is doing that and showing kids of my age that that's okay.
Listen, the whole reason why we are trying to why I'm saying we got to sit down and put everything everything on the table and get it fixed. That is one of the things we need to get fixed. Thank you, and I've got to.
My husband's retired Air Force aide, Marty's here.
Thank you. Thank you for his service.
In Arizona. Good luck. It increases housing.
Question. He said, do we meet with somebody of his staff?
That would be her. Well, here versus the school system so bad because the budget, but she's part of staff.
Not.
We got some shot in the state of Arizona.
That is destroying our education, the fabric of our democracy.
Comes from state and local taxes. Thank you for coming, ma'am.
And I would like, and I just wanted to let you know that my brother is very right. I am very left, and we still have a family.
Wonderful. Can I have a hug then? Thank you.
I make a comment. It's about taxes. One of the things that I think is quite deceptive is we talk about rates corporate rates in the United States being the highest in the world. That is actually a correct statement if in fact we're referring to marginal rates. But if you're talking about the effective rates, that is after all of the deductions come through, we actually have some of the lowest rates in the entire world.
Isn't that an argument for eliminating those deductions?
No, but you have to do both. You can't just go on this mantra of telling people, I mean, I'm talking about ideology that's coming through. We can't cut rates, we can't cut taxes, blah, 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 blah. Yes, we can't raise taxes. We have to raise revenue. It must be a balanced approach. You have got to eliminate these tax loopholes.
Okay, do me a favor.
Tax loopholes.
Absolutely.
All right?
We're in total agreement. We're in total
Get rid of
agreement.
them.
At least we're in half agreement.
Well, I mean, that comes from being part of my family that's a right and left, okay?
Thanks. Thanks for coming.
My brother that I
wanted to
Thank you again. I'm telling you, thanks for serving.
He's a
I wanted to ask your senator.
I'll be glad to have them. We're going to have more town hall meetings and we'll enjoy it. We'll invite more people. And we'll have more larger meetings.
You had to be here at 8:30 to get a seat.
It had to be moveon.org to get a seat.
Listen, next week, I promise you, next week we'll come back and do some more town hall meetings and we'll make sure we have larger venues so everybody can be there, okay?
But Senator McCain, I have a burning question.
Yes.
My burning question is, there are 40,000. There are 40,000 military that we left behind in
Europe.
No, in Japan. And Japan, because the war is over 66 years ago. Why are they there, not building our infrastructure and part of our economy? The war is over 66 years ago.
The military's job is not to build infrastructure. Glad to see that you very much. Thank you, sir.
You didn't ask my question.
I just wanted to thank your hand and thank you for putting up with me. I just have one question.
Sure. Thank you
He
for
is
your
not
passion.
listening. He didn't answer my question.
I'm telling you, ma'am, that we have security reasons to be in Japan. And if you don't like it, if you don't agree with that, I respect your views. I believe we have security interests there. And you don't believe so? I believe so. So, thank you. That's my answer. That's my answer. Well, in fact, North Korea is one. The rise of China, our economic and security interests in the region, those are my view as to why they're there. Go ahead.
Okay, I asked you a question.
Eisenhower, beware of the military complex.
You just answered by saying, I believe that tax breaks to the wealthy are invested in this country. You ought to research that because they are not. Look at the corporate reports, annual corporate reports, and you will see they're all building factories in China, Mexico, offshore. They're using the corporate tax breaks or the dodgers.
Would you do me a favor?
Well, you ought to look at it. That's what I'm asking.
I will. And will you do me the favor of saying we talked here and we had a spirited discussion and here's the information you, John McCain, should look at. Okay? And I promise you I'll look at it. Yeah. And say we talked at the town hall meeting, so it gets directly to me. And here's
I want you to read annual reports and see where they're going.
Or the information that you think that I need. Okay? Thanks.
Great to see you, Senator. My friend Ralph, he just wants to shake your hand. Thanks for Stevie. God bless you. Did a great job. I'm proud of you.
Thanks.
What did you...
No, we can do it right here.
No. Sure, where do you want to do this? Where do you want to do this?
Right here's fine.
Senator, what did you learn today?
Well, I learned that people have views and opinions and information that they think that I need, and I would just have discussions with them, and I get that information, I get their inputs, and town hall meetings are the fundamental of, in my view, of democracy, and I've had thousands of them, and I enjoy every one of them, and I enjoy the spirited exchanges. That's what they're supposed to be about.
You know, a lot of people were saying that they really want to see Republicans and Democrats actually work together and get things done. Yeah. I mean, what can you promise these folks?
I just told them what we thought we ought to do, in case you were not listening, and that is that we should have the president come forward with a specific plan to get our economy back on track. Congress will come back to Washington. We all sit down together and address these issues and come up with a result for the American people.
Senator, it sounded like a lot of those people wanted more than just budget economy issues. Republicans and Democrats sit down. It sounded like a larger anger issue, but we see a lot of anger here today too.
All over the country, in case you missed the polling data, but they do want, the underlying this frustration and anger is their belief that we have not come together to address the issues that are of great concern to them. Arizona is fine. So again, I think that we should have the president present a specific plan, Congress come back to Washington, we sit down together and address these issues. But of course there's frustration out there. When nearly half of the homes in our state are underwater, and we have in some areas double-digit unemployment in our state, of course, it's important for me to come and listen to them and respond to them. That's what they want right now. They want to vent a lot of their frustration to me, and I'm more eager to do that.
Specifically for job creation, I mean, you talked about various things that might lead to jobs, but specifically for
not might, I said these are things that will lead to job creation. Cut the corporate tax, have a moratorium on new regulations, moratorium on hiring of federal officials. Go ahead and have the employee tax holiday. There's a long list of things that we need to do to get our economy in the housing market is obviously stabilized, and that means give people a mortgage that they can afford to make their payments on.
What about entitlements?
Oh, everything has to be on the table, including proposals for future recipients of Social Security beneficiaries that we may have to raise their retirement age. We're going to have everything on the table.
Senator, 2 years ago you said in your campaign against Obama, you said we couldn't afford on-the-job training. 2 years later, 3 years later, do you think this is a result of that?
Well, I think the president's failure to lead has been abundantly clear. The select committee will have none of the president's people or the president on it that we formed up. He has yet to come forward with a specific proposal as to how we can get out of this mess. His speech yesterday, as the market was tanking, had no effect because he had no specifics. He's got to lead. He is, in the view of many, leading from behind.
We've also heard a lot of people angry at all the finger pointing going on, and it seems like right now you're pointing it straight at the president.
The president's the president. He's responsible. I'm not evading responsibility. I'm also saying Congress is not to act as well but the fact is the president leads, the president is responsible, and we never got a specific plan from the president of the United States. That's not an opinion, that's just facts. Okay?
Anybody?
Good to see you.
Great, thank you so much.